full leap. Because if you take just menus and toolbars and just take the buttons and put them in the ribbon, it's not going to solve anything. I mean, the ribbon's not snake oil. It doesn't solve anything by itself. It's just a means to helping to solve some problems. The other thing that we did was we took a lot of the UI throughout other places, not just menus and toolbars in Office, and moved it up into the ribbon to get some of that screen real estate back, so that actually net from 2003 to 2007, you don't lose usable screen real estate. One problem that I've seen of some of our partners who have used the ribbon in their apps is they haven't done that. They've kept maybe a toolbar under the ribbon, plus some panes and some other stuff, and they end up with a UI that's sort of even more cluttered than the previous one. So I think it also needs to superset the previous thing that you have. You have to be willing to take some things out to put a new thing in. Otherwise, that sense of mastery is just going to get worse, not better.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, I noticed in a lot of these prototypes, even the early ones, that the title bar is still there. And you have the file menu, or what became the Office button, is still small and only on one row. I was just wondering if you could provide some insight into how it finally evolved into the final form and why you finally kind of just kicked the file out of there.
Yeah, so we always intended to superset the file menu with something else. And actually, the thing that we didn't know was how far we were going to get along the plans that we had. And so we needed to wait to come up with a final visualization of the feature in terms of what we ended up coming up with. The real reason that we ended up going to the double height thing was a Fitts law affordance, which is to say if you put this in the corner, that you can easily come up here and just hit the corner and drop the thing down in a very easy way. Whereas if it's a tab in the tab row, it's a little bit harder. From a branding point of view, there was a desire to make the sort of start button for Office more similar to the start button for Vista, which is sort of where the visual representation of that came with. But this is an area that I think when you see sort of the future of Office, you'll understand more why we made some of the, we didn't just design things for one version, we sort of designed out a couple of versions. So I think you'll get a sense as you see sort of future versions of Office why we made some of the design choices that we did when we did. But Fitts law was part of it, and the branding was part of it as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that this is one of the probably the most inspiring talk I've seen in a few years.
Thank you.
I really like your design tenets and what you did with the product. And I wrote a spreadsheet a few years ago, and I have, unlike the gentleman from Norway, I have to applaud your switching to the XML open formats for Office. I think it's fantastic, and it's a great product.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Hello. Do you have any recommendations for people without access to the amount of data you have about your applications?
Yeah, it is a nice luxury, I will say, to actually have that data. I don't think that you need, I'll say this, I don't think that you need all of the fancy data collection mechanisms we have to get your mind around the data. It takes being a little more creative. Like there were some times back when we didn't have a chance to get some of the data that we wanted through usability labs or eye tracking, where we just had to use what we had. Like I remember being in a hotel at PDC when we first did Office, where we first rolled out Office, and asking the reception staff what they thought about different things and collecting data that way. I remember a time when we looked at people that were getting on a city bus, one of the team members, and asked them, when we were actually working on designs for the Office button, we just would go through the bus showing laptops with people and be like, what do you think of this versus this? What are you finding about that? So it's not quite as statistically salient, but you do what you can to be creative about it. Surveys are certainly something that you can do pretty cheaply. There are good and bad things about surveys, but you can learn stuff that way. Look at instrumenting things, especially for web apps. Instrumentation is not, you already have a server. So start to build in that instrumentation layer so you can track clicks and so that you can track what people are doing. It's a worthwhile investment. It actually took us, to build all the instrumentation, it took us an entire product team in Office 2003, and it had no customer benefit. Like when you ran Office 2003, there was no benefit to you. But the benefit to you came when we were able to use that data to refine Office 2007. So that was sort of an investment that we made that paid off 6 years after we did it, as opposed to having just one-off benefit at the time. So it'd be great to have all the data, but I think there are some ways to start to build up the sort of scientific rigor around your product. Hi.
Hi, fantastic talk, Jensen. Thank you so much for sharing. So a quick question is, we mentioned there are so many features in Office. So during your iterative design process, has your team thought about just have a very simple search box for search certain feature? I know that you can go to the help to search it, but just something in the UI.
Yeah, so we have thought about that, and we actually have a prototype that some of our folks in research helped us build, which I think may actually show up on Microsoft.com one of these days. And search is something that is, I think, really positive. One of the reasons that we didn't make it the primary way of getting to commands is it sort of creates a second way of getting to everything. And the hard thing is you can do search on command name fairly easily, but most people don't actually know the right command name. So one of the real limitations of the search that we found was that when you put it in front of people, they tended to use search first, and they weren't successful using it because they don't often know what the name of the thing that they're looking for was. So it was clear we would need to add another layer on top of it, another layer of sort of understanding of feature organization to sort of make it searchable. And we just didn't have the time to do that within Office 2007. It's also tricky. One of the problems we had in the prototype was getting it to work other than in English and a few other languages because of the way some other languages, like I think Korean is one, that is difficult to search the way that we end up having our commands internally in Office. So anyway, that's a very technical answer for, I think it's a good idea. I think you'll see more of that in the future, but we just didn't do it in Office 2007. But yes. Yeah, find would be easier. Yeah, we had a cool, for time reasons, I had to take out a bunch of prototypes. One of the cool ones that I had was called Keyboard Buddy, which was how maybe you could redo the keyboard part of the app to be less about going through accelerators and stuff, but more about sort of typing what you're trying to do, and maybe that would actually turn out to be fast. On my blog, I'm going to be posting some of this stuff later, and I'll probably get around to posting the Keyboard Buddy prototype as well, since I bothered to get it all sorted out, and I'll talk a little bit about those things. But
last question, please.
Last question.
Hi, I was just wondering if you can explain a little bit about the design process in a bit more detail, what kind of size of group you have, and did you change anything from previous versions in your design approach and design team?
Great question. So Office is split up into two kinds of teams, what we call application teams, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that are concentrating only on a certain application. And then we have shared teams. And the shared teams work on features that span all of the applications. And so one of the shared teams is the Office UI team, and that's what my team is. We were about 15 program managers, 30 developers, 30 testers, 3 or 4 designers, and 2 or 3 user experience researchers. And the Office UI team has existed for years. The thing that we changed starting in Office 2007 is before that time, it was sort of a team for people to use. They would make suggestions. They would say, hey, Word, it would seem to be better if you did that. And Word would say, thank you so much for your feedback. We'll consider that. And then it wouldn't happen. And so the team was staffed up and given the developers to actually make the changes in all the apps and the authority to make those decisions stick. We actually did the command layouts for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and Outlook. We actually, not to say that we were dictators, because we obviously listened to the suggestions from we're partners with the Word team and the PowerPoint team, and they had and they know their customers better than we did, so it was a partnership. But in the end, the difference, I think, was that we had final cut, and sometimes that caused some consternation, but it meant that we could make the thing feel like it was designed with one voice, by one person, even though it was sort of one team. So that's the biggest thing that we changed. It becomes increasingly hard for that to scale out, because even Word, Excel, and PowerPoint is a lot. If you had a substantially bigger suite of applications, it might be even harder. So it was also important for us to make sure that